My favorite childhood video game is finally being remade for the Nintendo Switch, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. One of the hallmarks of this game is the personality test that players take to decide what Pokemon will be the avatar throughout their game. And when I was a kid playing Mystery Dungeon back in middle school, I thought that this personality quiz was so cool. As a psychology student now, however, it does bring up some interesting issues about how personality is viewed in the field of psychology. And before beginning, I know that the Pokemon personality quiz is for kicks and giggles, and there are several personality quizzes that are just for kicks and giggles. However, I thought it was a good platform to use to address some theoretical complexities on personality assessments. First, we'll start with a basic definition. Personality, as defined by the American Psychological Association, is a combination of traits that define patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavioral patterns at an individual level. For this video, we're going to continue using that definition for thinking about how we are going to define certain traits that would make an individual distinguishable from another individual. So one of the first main debates in personality psychology is whether or not we view personality as a stable characteristic or an unstable characteristic. So if we know that personality is a combination of traits or characteristics, how do we know which traits stay the same, fade away, grow, or develop? Depending on how you answered that question, you might view personality as stable or unstable. Some psychologists think that personality should be viewed as stable. It's a set of defining characteristics that won't change. And if they do change, are those traits really defining a personality? And are they really defining what makes an individual different if it's changing? So as an example of a stable personality trait, it would be maybe if you're interested in a certain hobby. Maybe you view yourself as creative and you always engage in creative activities. This presents an interesting flaw. A lot of those questions that I asked earlier you probably are thinking, well, hold on, personality does change. Of course it changes. I'm not the same person I was as a kid that I am now. And, I mean, you would be right. Individuals do mature with age. So this framework doesn't really allow any kind of personal growth of different personality traits. You know, maybe someone was stubborn as they grew up, but as they matured, they became more open-minded. And they may still be, pretty stubborn from time to time, but they're not as stubborn as they were when they were, 12, when someone disagreed with them, to when they were like 30, it's very different. Did this stubborn personality trait disappear? Did it just mature with, social context coming in? It's not really appropriate to be stubborn to the degree that a 12-year-old is for very long. For unstable characteristics, these would be the opposite of stables. This would be personality traits change and can mature with age, but that goes completely against how a lot of people think about how to define an individual. If an individual isn't, somewhat stable, an individual personality isn't somewhat stable throughout their entire life, then is there any defining characteristic that can actually distinguish an individual from another? Even though I definitely have my own opinion, both of these viewpoints have their own flaws. A lot of interesting theoretical problems that come with personality. If you're thinking, hold on, why can't personality be both stable and unstable? And I guess there's no real reason, but there's just this stubbornness that everyone wants to be right in their own way, That means that the other person who doesn't share my view exactly the way I think of it has to be wrong, because otherwise I would be wrong. This is like the stubborn nature of scientists and especially psychologists. A really famous example is the nature versus nurture debate. It took us quite a while to agree that it's both, but even now we're kind of like trying to argue with each other on what percentage of nature versus nurture is causing what, and depending on what your opinion is, you would want it to be one factor more over another factor, so it's difficult. How we theoretically define personality makes defining personality very difficult. This continues on with these difficulties in trying to make a test for personality. How can we test personality if we don't know what it is? So we try to do these reliability and ability tests. One good test that we normally use in psychology is the test-retest. This is when an individual will take the same test twice. Hopefully you get the same result. However, I can guarantee that a good portion of personality test takers here have gotten a different result. So therefore, you found that this personality assessment wasn't very good because you didn't get the same result twice. But if you think back to the stable versus unstable argument, if personality changes, then isn't it a good thing that we didn't get the same result twice? Doesn't it just mean my personality changed? And the answer to that is we don't know. So how can test-retest be a good assessment? Another additional difficulty we have with making tests for personality is that we really like to try to figure out more things about ourselves, and if you spend time taking a personality assessment, chances are you're going to try to make it make sense. This is kind of like a placebo effect. Placebo effect would be finding that something was effective, but there was really nothing to it that made it work. It was just you wanting to make it work. So it's a fake difference, a fake effect. And personality tests, these silly personality tests, take advantage of that. And they make really general questions and general responses that almost anyone can resonate with and say, yeah, that makes sense. And hopefully you don't take the test again, because then you might be more skeptical. So I did take this assessment again, and I did get tortured twice. Does that mean that this Pokemon test is a good personality test? No, because if you saw the questions, you would think otherwise. This would be another test we use for deciding if a test is good or not, called a content validity assessment. And this is basically just intuition. Are the questions that we're asking relevant to how we are going to measure personality? A toilet hand question would not be one of these. This is an example of a question that was there for entertainment value. All in all, we don't know what personality is, we don't know how to measure it, and we don't know what our personality is in ourselves. What is personality? I hope that this doesn't cause you to despair about the field of personality psychology if you're interested. And if you weren't worried after this video, I would stay that way. This is something that psychologists are still researching. Some aspects of personality, like introversion and extroversion, are pretty agreed upon as personality traits, and even extroversion and introversion hints of it can be seen in child temperaments, and that persist into adulthood. But at least in my eyes, personalities exist. It can be difficult to separate it from other factors like maturation, social expectations, etc., but I think it's out there. So what do you think? do personalities exist? Feel free to have dissenting opinions. This is one of the debates that doesn't have a real right or wrong answer currently. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology corner, Speedpaint. If you like the content, be sure to let me know and subscribe. I'm hoping to do these videos monthly, and I will upload regular Speedpaints on the off week. Alright, thanks for watching.